After rejecting the Ram Mandir invite, Congress leaders of Uttar Pradesh visited Ayodhya. In Manipur, Rahul Gandhi said the reason the party isn't going is because it's now a BJP RSS event. I'm Barkha Dutt, you're with the Mojo Story. Our focus, looking ahead to 22nd January in Ayodhya, continues here at the Mojo Story. Now remember, this is going to be, irrespective of what your ideology and politics is, really an epochal moment. It is a big moment in terms of sentiment for millions of Indians, but it is also a big moment politically. It marks the culmination of decades of the BJP's Ram movement. But of course, it's important to remember that what's happening has come after a Supreme Court verdict. To talk about the impact of this moment on society, on our country, on how we look at religion, how we debate secularism, how we define pluralism, but also the politics around it. We'll be speaking today to two very interesting, often provocative, often contrarian, but fiercely independent-minded thinkers and authors. In fact, the two men I'm about to introduce, the delightful thing about them is that it's very difficult to confine them with neat little bows and labels on what they might say on subject A or subject B. So let's introduce our two guests on the program today as we look ahead at the Ayodhya moment. I want to welcome to the program Kapil Komireddi. Kapil Komireddi is a well-known author. He's authored a book called The Malevolent Republic. He also has a recent piece out in the print arguing that the Congress, unlike what others have suggested, has not made a mistake in choosing to reject the Ram Mandir invite. I'm also joined by Hindol Sengupta. He's a historian and an author. He has an extremely important book called The Soul and Sword out on political Hinduism and makes some very interesting arguments about actually looking at Jawaharlal Nehru and Veer Savarkar and arguing that their concept of sacred geography was not as apart as today's right-wing and left-wing labels actually imagine. Thank you very much, both of you, for joining us. Let me start with you, Hindol. This moment, there are those who want to separate it from politics. But how can we separate it from politics when the BJP went from 2 seats to first over 80 seats in parliament on the back of this Ram movement? And I ask you this because your book is actually the history of political Hinduism. And some might argue that nothing represents political Hinduism more accurately, more aptly than what we're seeing unfold in the run-up to 22nd January. Hindol, go ahead.
Certainly nothing represents political Hinduism in its most current avatar, which is after the formation of the Bharatiya Janata Party, then the Ram Janmabhoomi movement, the culmination of which, as you said, of course, is the Ram Mandir. However, as I've argued in my book, the Hindu political movement has a much deeper and a longer history. While of course you're right that we can't separate the politics from this moment, because of course such movements are always political and it is integral to the history of political Hinduism, I argue very strongly, Barkha, as you know, I do not comment on individual political parties, but I would like to very strongly argue that to see it only as a political moment is very limited. I think this moment represents something much bigger and wider for millions, tens of millions of Hindus. It is a moment of resurgence of Hinduism in a sense, in many ways through this temple, and even people who don't consider themselves perhaps at a ritualistic level, day-to-day practicing Hindus, are also deeply moved by it. So this will have a spillover impact across India. Already you're seeing pilgrimages are filling in India, pilgrim towns are filling in India. There is definitely going to be a cultural, transformation of India. In what manner and shape and form we will see, but I am, absolutely certain that this is a civilizational moment, as I've said before, like no other, and this moment will go down in history.
Before I hand the floor to Kapil, on this argument, Hindol, that political Hinduism predates the BJP's Ram Mandir Andolan and Rath Yatras and so on, and you trace it back to 500 years ago. Can you expound on that?
Look, actually, the first time the word Hindutva was used, it was not used by Savarkar at all, or not even Chandranath Basu, as some people have argued. Actually, the first time the word Hindutva was used was in a book by Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay called Ananda Mat. Now,
Hmm.
Ananda Mat is a seminal text because Ananda Mat is the book from where India gets its national song, Vande Mataram. The context of that book really is Bengal is suffering great famine. There's a lot of oppression, and there are these warrior monks hiding in forests in their forest refuge who basically emerge to fight and bring justice. That's the context of Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay's book. Of course, I don't have time to go into why he wrote such a book. What did
Hmm.
he see around him? He of course was like everybody else, a product of his time. We don't have time for all of that, but certainly at the very least it goes up to Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay, but perhaps even further back. Please remember, Chhatrapati Shivaji claimed that he was building Hindavi Swarajya, and even in your show we've spoken about how there are different ways to look at that. Naipaul, felt that the destruction of Vijayanagara kingdom represented a moment in political Hinduism. And
Hmm.
there are multiple interviews of Naipaul that where he talks about this. So all of this goes back a long time ago, including I have to say it's important to remember even the Ram Janmabhoomi movement predates not only the BJP but it predates the RSS itself. It is a much older movement. It is true that the BJP in a particular avatar brought it to a particular culmination, but the struggle for Ram Janmabhoomi is a very long one and it goes deep into the colonial era. So,
Okay.
I think we should have a historical context. The historical context shouldn't be forgotten.
Okay, I want to bring in Kapil Komireddi now, and I do this with by way of introduction to audiences who may not be as familiar with his work as I am. Kapil has been a critic of definitely of the Modi government, but also a fierce critic of the Gandhi family and its hold over the Congress party. And therefore, Kapil, it was very interesting to read your column on the digital platform, The Print, where you actually say, you argue that the Congress has actually got it right. You say Ayodhya event is not about Ram, but it coordinates Hindutva as a state religion. Now, before I ask you to expound on that, here's the problem with what I see as the ideological confusion within the Congress. You've had the UP Congress leaders making a dash for Ayodhya. They're probably going to go later as well. What they seem to be rejecting is not so much the Mandir moment, but the BJP's domination of that moment. And therefore, I'm not sure that there's much ideological purity in their response. Do go ahead.
Right. So I'm not defending the Congress Party as a whole. I'm commending the position taken by the leadership of the Congress Party in this instance. And I make that very clear. I'm not a spokesman of the Congress Party. You'll have to invite one of them
Of
to explain
course,
the
of course,
party's
yeah.
position. Now, is this Hindol, gave a very expansive answer in which he talked about a civilizational resurgence. It is possible to see this moment, this inauguration, this consecration, as a moment of civilizational resurgence. If that is so, it has been achieved through very uncivilized means. This temple exists because a crime was committed. P.V. Narasimha Rao at the time called it an assault on the institutions upon which the constitutional structure of this country is built. That assault is not undone by the Supreme Court justice. It's a very by the Supreme Court's judgment. It was a very dark day in our republic's history. Thousands of people were killed as a result of that, and the trauma of that day continues to live on in the people who remember that day. And history cannot be revenged. That is one of the points I was trying to make. That I'm not dismissing the deep feeling many Hindus have about this temple, nor am I dismissing Hindol's thesis about political Hinduism. I've read his book. It's a very subtle and important book. What I am, however, arguing is that this is a very, very, very political moment. This is a moment, this great idea of Rama, this God King of India, has been appropriated and frankly subordinated to this man, the Prime Minister of India. And many, many religious authorities, very preeminent religious authorities, have actually objected to the consecration taking place on the 22nd of January because the temple isn't actually complete, the structure isn't fully built. But it's being done anyway because the Prime Minister seeks to reap profits from it. And this is very squalid. If you are a Hindu, if you're approaching this from a position of reverence, then it's really an insult to your religion. And if you're approaching this as an Indian secularist, as I do, then this is a very tragic day, because this is a day I see that temple as a tone to the secular ideals upon which our country was built.
Can I ask you though, I don't remember a moment as far back as my mind takes me to the contemporary political history of India, that any politician has actually not reaped gains where a religious context has offered them the opportunity to do so. So if you think about Indira Gandhi and her attempt to Hinduize her politics, captured magnificently in Nirja Chaudhary's recent book on the prime ministers of India, where she actually says the RSS liked Indira better than they liked Vajpayee. If you look at Rajiv Gandhi and the unlocking or the permission for the Shilanyas, if you look at what Rajiv Gandhi did with alimony for Muslim women in what we know as the Shah Bano case, if you look at Narasimha Rao, whom you quoted, who both looked the other way, some say, and allowed the demolition to take place, and later suggested that he should inaugurate a trust that might rebuild it. The argument I'm making is, when indeed has politics been separate from any religious opportunity in India? That I can't remember even one. Maybe I'm just cynical.
Sure, because you've cited a series of instances where politicians reap benefits from communal divisions. That doesn't justify this, nor does it render it justifiable, because it is still, the fact does not change that there was a mosque on the site where the temple is being built, and that mosque was raised through a criminal act, right, in defiance of a court order, in defiance of assurances given to the government. And that history is part of our living history, Barkha. That history, Kundera said that the struggle of man against power is the struggle of memory against forgetfulness. And I feel as though we constantly have to remind ourselves that this monument didn't just come up. It is the product of a very poisonous campaign to remake India, to establish the supremacy of one community over the other. People who talk about civilization, Hindu civilization, I think about Indian civilization, Barkha. What we achieved after the departure of the British in 1947 is staggeringly original. It's a very radical idea to turn people who had always, throughout history, been subjects into citizens. To say that somebody from Andhra and somebody from Kashmir is going to be an equal citizen of one state, even though they have differences of language and race and religion, is a very radical idea. We should be proud of it. I don't think we should be seeking to undo this. And I think some Hindol cited V.S. Naipaul. Naipaul is often misquoted, and I think he's frankly abused. One of the things he said, if you read his book, his first book where he talks about an area of darkness, there's an injunction in there. He says, the past must be seen to be dead, or the past will kill. What Naipaul was saying, and I wrote about this in my obituary to Naipaul in The Spectator, is that he was saying, accept the past, acknowledge the past, and then move on from it. Don't strive to avenge the
erase
past.
it. I get the point that you're making.
Didn't arrive at a reconciliation with our painful past. That's why the Hindu nationalists or the political Hindus were able to weaponize it and drive us to this very sordid moment.
Let me bring in Hindol now. The erasure of history is an important question that is raised by Kapil. And I bring it up because we should remember that, yes, there is a Supreme Court verdict, but there were fault lines that were exposed in Indian politics, in Indian society. There was the demolition that Advani called the saddest day of his life, right? I think everybody would agree, and even the Supreme Court in its judgment said that the demolition was unlawful, and that whoever was responsible for it, action should be taken against them. This is what the Supreme Court said while delivering the verdict that has made this Ram Mandir possible. The point I think that Kapil is making, leaving aside what the Congress does and doesn't do for a moment, is that in all of the sentimentalism, in all of the belief, in all of the faith, in all of the diya lighting, can we forget that there was a rupture? There was a rupture, and that rupture needs healing. And how do you make a moment of healing, a moment of unity, instead of a moment of triumphalism? Hindol.
I think that moment of healing, Barkha, is represented by the main Muslim litigant on the Babri Masjid side in the court case today, welcoming not only the building of the Ram Mandir, but actively participating in the rejoicing of building of the Ram Mandir, and frankly speaking quite openly about how he wishes to, welcome the, inauguration of the Ram temple. It's very easy, and frankly, I think it's slightly disingenuous to talk about history in this manner, simply because we also have to take into account not just the history of the Babri Masjid, and its demolition, of course, was unfortunate, but there is also a much longer and deeper history. And this is not to say that every historical ailment, so to speak, must be avenged. That's not the point, but the point is to deny that thousands and thousands of people over centuries have felt in a particular way about a particular site which is sacred and dear to them, frankly, is really pretentious and pompous, because who are we to speak for them? And how dare we presume that just because the elite of India, decided on a particular way for the country at independence, and a way, frankly, I agree, as part of the English educated elite, so to speak. But how dare I presume that that negates thousands and thousands of people and their feelings and their versions, so to speak, of history? India also has an extremely, I agree that Babri Masjid's tearing down, and of course, subsequently, the bomb blast that Mumbai saw, the riots that happened, all of this is extremely blood-soaked. But India has had a very blood-soaked history also, which stretches hundreds of years. And there are people and there are, collective memories and communities that haven't forgotten that history. And I think we should, at the very least, we should have the humility to accept that these opinions are extremely alive. They are part of people's lived experience. They are part of people's, inherited lived experience, so to speak, because that apathy and that pain has never gone away. And especially on the holiest sites of Hinduism, in a country that is, predominantly Hindu, those things rancor. And that is not necessarily, that doesn't justify what a mob may have done. But I think when we're debating such issues, when we're discussing such issues, we must keep that wider context in mind. And it would be extremely, extremely, rude of us, frankly, and really hurtful of us not to keep that context in mind. Just because, as self-proclaimed seculars, it doesn't matter to us. It may not matter to us, but it matters to millions of people. And you will see those millions of people thronging the temple, not just on the 22nd, but every other day as the temple opens. And they will, as Simon Sharma famously, spoke about, footsteps, so to speak, that determine the pilgrims' footsteps, that determine, what a landscape is. You will see that through the footsteps of those pilgrims, they will determine what that temple means to them and what this history means to them. And to try and wipe that out in an extremely pat manner, I think, we can debate all these things, as I've said earlier in your shows. It does not matter. It does not matter on the ground. It doesn't matter to millions of people. We can keep debating these things, till the cows come home. But on the ground, it doesn't matter.
Let me bring in Kapil. We have 5-6 minutes left, so I want to just get in as many interjections as I can from both of you. Kapil, there is this idea that secularism, in the way that Nehru imagined it, Nehru famously not wanting the president, for Rajendra Prasad, to go for the Somnath Mandir sort of ceremony. That secularism has gone, and that secularism hasn't in fact worked for India, because it has failed to understand that culture and religion are intertwined in India, and therefore, even if you do not necessarily endorse an institutional faith, you culturally identify. That is the core of your identity. You say Jai Shri Ram or Jai Siya Ram in place of hello, hi, and so on. And that the deracinated, faithless, westernized, liberal, that might be words used to describe you, me, Hindol, anybody. I'm not saying this is how we see ourselves. I'm saying this is how people may see us. We're out of sync. We're out of sync with how people of India feel, and no significant Muslim opposition has actually been made to this moment. And Iqbal Ansari's story is quite moving. I interviewed him. He was the litigant in that case. And he said, now the court has spoken, I accept the verdict with happiness. I will take part in it.
Right. If there's anything that's historically literate, it's to claim that the project that was floated in 1947 after the departure of India was an elite project. It was the Constitution of India was debated thoroughly. It was ratified in a free election. For the first time, enfranchised millions in India voted for it. It was not a project imposed upon people. It was a project ratified by the people. And this idea, this constant, you talked about us being elites and Anglophone. So what? I mean, are we supposed to just surrender to the basest impulses of people, to say that we are wrong because of your feelings? Are we supposed to subordinate the constitutional laws of this country? The respect for
but this is citizens. A Supreme Court verdict, if you're talking about constitutional law.
I'm talking about 91, 92, when, the tearing down of the mosque. Are we supposed to subordinate everything to the basest impulses of people because they feel a particular way? Since when are feelings so important? Since when this is not a religious republic. This is a democratic republic, a secular republic. If feelings are to be given the position, if feelings are to be made sacrosanct, then I might have feelings, and at some point, many other people might share those feelings. What if at a certain point, many people feel that Hinduism is, a very primitive form of life because it actually segregates human beings. No other people, no British, no outsider, no Muslim has mistreated Hindus more than Hindus have done themselves. To this day, there is discrimination in the name of caste. Shouldn't we use our energy to improve that? I don't want to sound like somebody who doesn't get the feelings and the emotions involved in this, but I also don't understand this idea that we have to surrender meekly to people who talk about feelings. Please, I have no time for this. And they'll build this. No, just one second, Barkha. They'll build this temple. They'll open this temple. This is a moment of triumph for them. Fine. They'll have this moment. But there is something very important to remember that Orwell talked about, that, power worship distorts the way you think. Power worship leads you to believe that this moment, present trends will always hold. They won't. There will come a time this moment will be looked upon as a shameful moment. I'm pretty confident of that. And the people who now worship Modi, who fabricate apologies for them, rationalizations for him, they'll be covered in shame.
Okay, so I take it, before I give Hindol the last word, that you do not give any importance to the fact that this has actually come from the Supreme Court of India on a bench led, by the now Chief Justice. I mean, I don't think he led it then, but he's widely believed to have written the judgment. You're basically, therefore, then saying the Supreme Court's voice.
No, I'm not saying that. You're putting words into my mouth. I'm
asking you.
The tearing down of the mosque was a barbaric act that is not justified by the feelings of the Hindu community, number one. Number two is the event that is taking place on the 22nd of January is a political event in which the deity of the deity who is moving so many Hindus is actually being subordinated to the political aspirations of one man. Shouldn't that insult Hindus? So I'm making those two very specific points.
Okay, I do have to close. I'll give the last word to Hindol with a question of my own. And that question is, the Supreme Court verdict actually referenced the Places of Worship Act. The Places of Worship Act, which is now being, is back in court, was supposed to say that there has to be a finite closure on how many mosques we go looking underneath for signs that temples once stood there, because, there has to be at some point closure. There has to be at some point reconciliation. And to be honest, as an Indian, I would have really preferred had this moment perhaps come as a moment of consensus between and among communities, and those efforts were made. They didn't yield any results, and so the Supreme Court has delivered this verdict. As far as I'm concerned, the Supreme Court has the last word on this, and that word has been spoken. And now the question is, can this be made into a moment of healing? But what worries me is there a danger that this could now lead to other demands at other sites, that there is no closure, that this is going to open the floodgates? That's my last question to you.
Let me begin by answering your question by saying I was once again today amused to hear this old colonial tribe that, Hinduism, this terrible thing which oppressed people for hundreds of thousands
No,
of years, castes and so on and so forth. I mean, all of this has been academically demolished and shown to be
I
absolute
think Kapil's
ridiculous
trying to
nonsense.
clarify that he did or
But
did not say that.
no, but I didn't interrupt when he spoke. I think I deserve my right to speak too. I did not interrupt him when he spoke.
Okay,
So I
Kapil,
just
hang on. I'll let you speak after this. Hindol, go ahead. Yeah.
So look, I mean, this kind of tripe we have heard many times before. It matters to no one. But sure, they can keep being repeated. I mean, so what? As far as the legality of the question is concerned, yes, indeed, the Supreme Court's version has to be the final word. It must be. That's what institutions do. They give us the final word when society cannot make up the final word. Yes, there were attempts to, reconcile the communities. They didn't work. Now that's a whole history in itself. We don't have time to go into that. I do not think, and only time will tell. We are making forecasts in this conversation. Only time will give us the answer. I do not think this will necessarily, there is this old thing that every time, certain kinds of political movements rise, India will be torn apart and there will be riots everywhere. None of this has happened. This is, 10 years have gone by, maybe more will happen. None of this has happened. My faith is really in broader Hindu society and their, feelings and really feelings. Surely if today in our woke times, if we cannot care about feelings, when will we care about feelings? So, maybe we can keep aside the hypocrisy there. But yes, I have great faith in the pluralism of Indian society, of which is majority Hindu. I have great faith in the inherent pluralism of Hindu society. And I don't think necessarily that this is the path towards doom, as some people are claiming it to be. I do think that this is certainly a moment of great resurgence for Hindu civilization. Are there fears that things may go wrong? But there are fears that things may go wrong in as large a country as ours all the time, on everything. But I certainly don't think that this is necessarily going to lead to a future which is so bleak and dark as has been described on your show.
Okay, Kapil, quick clarification and then 30 seconds to both of you. Yes, quickly.
This is so caste is a colonial slur. It was invented by the colonialists. There is no caste discrimination or prejudice in the name of caste in India. That is a colonial
But you weren't
invention.
smearing an entire faith, right? Every religion has its orthodoxy, its malpractices. Most orthodoxies are tilted against women, for example, in all faiths. All I'm asking you is, all I'm saying to you is,
that is Yemen, Japan.
Can I just get my question in, then you can respond. All I'm asking you is that I thought when you gave that example, you were talking about caste in Hinduism as an example, that what if I were to feel this? You weren't actually making a judgment about a faith. I would hope that you were not.
I was trying to clarify that the energies of the faith, if Hindus want to reform themselves, as Mahatma Gandhi did, would be better spent, I think, rather than tearing down the houses of worship of others, on reforming their own society, our own society. And I think that Babri Masjid is not the end. This is the beginning. They will go for more mosques. The thing is, concessions to religious bigots, religious revivalists never result in the recession of their demands. They will keep making more demands. And I don't believe that this is the end of India. I actually believe that this is the beginning of the end of these fanatics who've taken over India.
Okay, Hindol, I'm going to give you the closing comment.
Look, I mean, we are ending on a note of prediction. So who can really predict the future of a 1.4 billion strong people? I can only say that, in my personal lived experience and the lived experience of millions of others, there is certainly a mood that is, or there is certainly a feeling that's surging across India. I mentioned this in your earlier show, Barkha, and since you mentioned the author, allow me to mention that again. The same Neerja Chaudhary recently told you in an interview that she was at Kashi and she saw 20, 30,000, maybe more young people, young Indians, quietly, without disturbing anybody, without creating a ruckus, with no conflict at all, gathering to watch the Ganga Aarti. This in many ways is unprecedented across India. It's happening at scales never seen before. And therefore, I say that at this moment, at least, I don't want to predict anything in the future, but at this moment, at least, there is a great resurgence and a positive resurgence of a particular kind of feeling among Hindus. And I have great faith in the inherent pluralism of Hindu society. Fundamentally, I believe Hindus are, centrists. No extreme ever fundamentally exists for a long time in Hinduism. Finally, the needle shifts back to the center. And I think I have great faith in that. And I do think that's what's going to happen. And I have my, faith and trust in that.
Okay, we leave it there with a question of my own for all of you to think about. What I'm very interested to know in terms of a political question is this is a political culmination of decades of a political religious movement. Will the BJP recast itself after this? Will it deepen its affiliation with Hinduized politics? Will it change? Will it pivot? We simply don't know, because one thing that Prime Minister Modi, irrespective of where you stand on him, has shown in the last 10 years is that you simply can't predict his next move. And I would sort of say pay attention to the meeting with Christian religious leaders on Christmas, and also the sacred chadar sent for the Ajmer Dargah. Just observations, no predictions. Thank you very much, Kapil and Hindol. It has been a very important conversation, and I'm glad we can still have a debate, have an argument, and end with somewhat of a smile on all our faces. Thank you, and take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mojo Story has always made a commitment to its viewers to go to where the story is. And as you can see here, we are at the epicenter of the Israel war on Gaza. We are right at the front line, about 1 mile from the Gaza Strip, as the Israeli military gets ready with its tanks and its gunners to begin its final frontal assault that will take troops into Gaza. As we said, we are not like other organizations. We believe in giving you all sides of the story objectively and as much as possible from the ground. And that's exactly what we're doing here, covering the biggest global story today from the epicenter of the war zone. So please, we need your support. Support us, become a Mojo member, subscribe to us, spread the word, and thank you for your support.